what's going to happen is you're going to go in thinking you have the right answer, and yet
With
all your
confidence.
with confidence, and yet everything else.
Welcome to the We Talk First podcast with me, your host, Sylvia Peter. And I have with me on the podcast today, I have Sègun De Silva. And Sègun is a global GTM leader, strategist, and international keynote speaker who connects sociocultural anthropology, business, and AI. Sègun, we're so glad to have you on the podcast today. And we're going to be exploring the topic AI will not fix broken organizations, right? So, Sègun, what do you say about this term, the illusion of technological fix, where it is believed that technology only accelerates existing operational patterns, right? That's what it does. It doesn't necessarily change everything. People just have this illusion that when you just bring AI, you bring technology, um, you implement it, you integrate it in your organization's system, everything is just going to magically change. So what do you say to that illusion? What do you have to say about that? What's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be on the podcast. The conversations you've been driving have been amazing. So let me start off by saying that organizations are always looking for a solution.
Mm,
Oftentimes, you're trying to solve a problem. And in many cases, technology is about actually notion of a solution. It's the notion of a product or something that's going to make it easier or better for you.
mm,
If we think about how the evolution of technology or how human culture has existed, we talk about these jumps with the fire and then the wheel, and then we talk about, okay, now we have the steam engine, and then we have blah 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 electricity, and we talk about these jumps. But for every jump, there are actually equal problems that normally exist, and they're caused. But they solve a solution for one problem that are beneficial to others. And so
mm.
I would ask you, if we're talking about technology and we're talking about organizations and success, right? Can I ask you a question? How many
Sure.
times have you heard about the word deduping your data in the last 25 years? Probably a lot. How much time have you heard about deduping your data in your career?
Mm.
I'm asking you a question. Have you heard it often about we have duplicates in this data that we need
Yes,
to correct?
yes, yes, yes.
So we're talking about organizations most likely that have used multiple systems and they still have the core problem of deduping their data,
Mm,
right? So how is AI going to come in and dedupe all your data per se? It can do some of it, just like every other tool you've had can do some of it. But ultimately the solution is rigor, data management, and process and control. And that's critical because those are behaviors that you have to start off about. What are you willing to invest to solve a problem, a real problem?
mm,
And AI can solve some of that, yes, but someone's still got to review that data to make sure it's correct.
mm,
So I would ask you the question of, when you have a conversation, do you want to have the answer and say it's going to solve your problem? Or do you want to have a real conversation about what is it going to take to make sure that problem is actually properly solved? That's the
mm,
key difference right now with AI and how we're talking about it on a regular basis.
mm, Okay. So, what do you think, why do you think that tech, AI, any form of tech, cannot fundamentally, what do you think the issue is, apart from the fact that people have this, they don't really pay so much attention to the core of the problem, the real problem that we're trying to solve here, right? And people just want to just slap it on because it's popular or because it's trendy. And what would you say that fundamentally, why can't it fix a broken system? Fundamentally.
I mean, it goes back to the reason why we use technology to make it easier. These things are
Mm,
hard, they're difficult, they take expertise, they take knowledge, they take applied knowledge. And so, in many cases, when you have a problem that's in front of you, you're trying to get it to the next level so you can keep moving forward. And sometimes that's how can I get this problem solved so I can keep moving my organization growing? How can I keep moving forward? And I think that in lots of cases, you can use AI if the right person's around using it and has the base understanding of why that might be a solution, is willing to have deep conversations with you about why those pain points exist, to really understand how they're going to create a culture within your organization that will change fundamentally how you approach the problem. You have to think about it from the standpoint that any solution that you're putting forth is a change in someone's workflows or culture
Mm,
or their approach or like, and so you have to think about when you're doing that as an organization often, how much are we going to change? How much is it going to require training? What's going to adoption going to be if we do make this change and all of a sudden people are not happy about it? You've seen that with AI adoption as a whole.
yeah.
How do you get people to buy into adopting this technology and use it effectively? That's an issue that we have to really take a step back and think through. And sometimes we're pushing so quickly that we're trying to come up with these use cases to see who's going to come up with the answer or a different answer, that we don't take the time to be critical. And
Mm,
that's because in often cases, there's a notion that you have to win the race and you don't want to be left behind. And that is a cultural component. So how do you actually win that game is you have to have the right people around you to have these really difficult conversations, to challenge you in many cases to come up with the best solution, and with multiple stakeholders too. You don't want to have limited stakeholders. You want to have multiple stakeholders engaged.
mm,
That's the way forward, and that takes time, and time often is the thing that you do not get back. It's the one cost that you do not get more of.
mm. Well, I love that you mentioned culture because there's just this thing about we tend to forget that when it comes to technology, people are going to adopt it at the end of the day. It's humans that are going to use this technology at the end of the day, right? So how do we even, think about them? How do we think about, consider the timing that it'll take, how it affects people's psychology, but coming to this conversation about culture, how much do you think culture affects? I know it affects technology adoption a lot, but what kind of environment do you think will be considered safe enough and will make adoption more easier? You think, because I feel like in an environment where people are ruled by maybe hierarchy or fear, and they just, maybe they cannot say how they feel about certain things, and they just tend to step back a little bit. It's not a safe culture. How do you think that we can make the environment more safer for people to be able to, welcome this technology? What do you think that leaders need to consider to have that done? I don't have prior knowledge. I'm trusting in this tool to give me knowledge, and because I believe that it does all the research and it does good work, and then I come here, and what I'm going back with is just a piece of the pie, not the full thing, right? So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really important because, as an academic, I think that we're talking about experience, we're talking about knowledge and critical thinking, we're talking about perspective, right? And if I give you a series of books to read, I don't have to agree with what's being written, but at least I can come up with my own
Yeah.
perspective on how that translates to my lived experience or what I believe is a business experience. Because what we're losing sight of sometimes is, if you have like a cliff notes, everyone has an answer, and your teachers will tell you, no, no, I need you to read the real book. Or in this case, I need you to in math, they tell you to do the equation. I can give you the answer, but they're like, no, 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 you got to do the entire equation. And there's a reason behind that. But again, what does that take to do that work, to do the equation, to read those books? It takes time.
Okay. Yes, yes.
So what
It's
we're
a
talking
process.
about in that case, right, is that time is the thing that we are basically saying we don't want to do time on those things. We want time right now. And if you
Mm,
don't understanding to read those books, to come with your own knowledge, how are you going to solve a problem, a more challenging problem, an issue, if you're not thinking through how do you get to the correct answer? Or
Mm.
this is how my perspective is because I read this, this, and this, and I can see how that
Yes.
person's
Yes.
work connects to
Yes.
this work and can
Yes.
connect to this country and this
Yes.
company. And I think in so many times we get blinders that we don't actually take the time to really understand or gain those perspectives. And I've seen it in business. And this is one of the things I used to tell people. You have people who might be trying to sell to an organization, right? But do they have the time to research that organization to understand what is connected to them? It's the same thing as reading books and then going to AI, and the AI is giving you its perspective, or it's taking what you're saying and trying to give you the happy answer. It doesn't mean it's the right answer. It just means that it's thinking you have that. So if you go into a meeting with something that you think is the correct answer without actually asking the right question and doing the research yourself, or asking for discovery, or asking like qualitative and quantitative data, what's going to happen is you're going to go in thinking you have the right answer, and yet
With
all your
confidence.
foundation with confidence, and yet everything else potentially could be wrong. There's nuance, and the nuance is the understanding and the perspective. Now, if
Mm.
everyone's using the system, everyone uses the same system, maybe it'll work out. Which is why you see these lovely videos and experiments where bots or agents are talking to agents, and you see how they end up interacting, and if they can speak their own language. I mean, there's all types of things that you can see, but that's because you've removed everything else out of it except for the agent on the agent, which is why multi-agent is so exciting because it removes all the other pieces out of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that what you're going to get is going to be the right answer because the nuance matters.
Yes. I really love this conversation because it then comes to what quality of people are we going to become when we move ahead with this technology in the next 10 years? What kind of what quality of people are we growing to become, right? Are we becoming people that pay attention to details, or we just want everything quick, want everything right now? We're not really thinking about it, we're not really thinking through, and then letting these tools do the job that is meant to do. It's like we're outsourcing the main part of it. And the main part of it, the most important part of it, is our point of view. It's our opinions, what we take from all of this information and we form. But then when we, outsource it, we don't do the research, we just consume everything and then just push it out there. I think, that's something that we have to actively war against and, fight against. I mean, for agents, your own agency, and coming up with your own conclusions by yourself. I pray we don't lose that. I hope we don't lose that, because it's looking like.
Well, again, it comes down to the human in the loop, right? That's why you always hear people say, "Oh yeah, there's a human in the loop," because the human in the loop does add that layer of complexity and complex, right? Yes, we can do more and scale a certain way, but we still need that person to look at it, to train, to look at this and to say, okay, this is not the right answer. This wouldn't be the answer I would give. I remember a particular use case with one of the largest companies in Japan, and they had rolled out a brand new solution. It was supposed to be way better. It was going to solve a lot of their problems. It actually got rid of a number of redundancies. But guess what? The end user felt it took longer to load the web page.
Hmm,
And for
well,
them, we could highlight how you could load the web page faster from the server, but it was a rendering issue. And as a result, the end user still felt it was taking more time to do their job.
mm,
And that organization had to go back and have strategic conversations about how we could potentially improve the rendering time because their employees were feeling it was changing their workflow. It doesn't matter sometimes what you think the solution is going to be if someone is saying it takes half a second more. And that to me is taking longer in my brain because I've gotten used to how fast something loads,
yeah.
right? And that becomes a conversation of what is actually important to your organization and to the people who use that technology. I think that for me, I always talk about one of the things that you see disappear after a while is the complexity of UAT testing. User acceptance testing is huge. But because, again, time and speed is something that we're working with, do we actually include the right amount of people in the right amount of time to make sure you're doing that user acceptance testing before that go live? So you can go back and check those things to make sure how it's loading or not loading.
Mm,
And I think that from a cultural standpoint, just that alone is where we're going to now, which is where we're saying that things can be done easier and faster. But in many cases, I see people going back and saying, well, that's great. You can do that with vibe coding. But then you have to spend how much time going back and reviewing it? How much time do you have to make sure that code is actually the most optimal code? And so forth and so on. But guess what? If you're not a programmer, if you don't have the domain expertise, you won't know you need to do that. So there's still this need for those conversations for people to really dive in and understand that these are conversations as leaders. We have to make sure that, yes, we might have a solution. Yes, we might have a path forward. But how do we include people in that conversation so that they feel comfortable and curious enough to push back, to state what the challenges are? Or are they just adopting it because they're told to adopt? And
mm,
if you think about what happens with technology, we talk about the accidental admin that exists in certain organizations, or we talk about the person who was curious enough to build out an entirely net new strategy, leveraging the technologies that no one thought they were going to use. Why? Because that person was curious. That person had the luxury of having the leadership that encouraged them to do that, that they were part of a process that allowed them to use technology in a way that otherwise might not have been seen by this tiny group of people that can then benefit everyone else around them because they're in the weeds, they're doing the job, and they feel empowered. It doesn't mean that you don't make the strategic decision, but you have to make a strategic decision in your culture to make sure that people have that joy and that ability to try, because those are the employees that are going to basically push you forward.
mm,
And those are the leaders around you who are going to also have the luxury, the information, and the perspectives that you might not have because you're like in a conversation about something else, such as your revenue targets, or you're in a conversation about your partnerships or your operations. You need people who are going to give you the correct information and the correct multiple perspectives of people underneath them as well.
mm, mm. Yes, thank you so much. That was very insightful and packed. So coming to a company's real edge in this time of AI, where knowledge is accessible, speed is accessible, everything is just fast and everywhere. What do you think a company's real edge is right now?
I think it's still domain expertise. I really do believe that when I did a sample, I was writing something with AI, and AI, and depending on the system, most systems are designed to give you the information you're asking for to make you happy. And you don't know what, like, I had an example where I was doing putting together some anthropological information, and the system was protecting non-canonical Western thought. It was told it had to
I
protect
saw
it because
that.
the
I
people,
saw that
you saw
post.
that? You saw that article?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was because the system had been written by someone to do that. And because I understood what I was typing from a different perspective, because it was foundational for me, it was giving me information that was different. Now imagine if I did not understand, because the system is not designed all the time for the person who understands what it's saying. Most people will not understand what it's saying
Yes.
because not everyone has all that information and that knowledge. I can't tell you that I know everything. I might know enough about this topic to catch it, but if you told me to go do a deep diving program on Python script, I could probably get to it at some point, but it's not going to be in a single chat window, right? Or a
Yeah.
coding prompt where I can quickly identify what the problem is, right? And so I think that is the biggest challenge, is that as we move forward, there is so much information that's being produced that we are not able, without the domain expertise, to catch it.
Thank you so much. You've been so generous on this episode. But the one last thing, do you have one thing that you want to let organizations know, maybe leaders out there concerned, if you have one advice for them or you have a thought to leave with them, what would that be?
I think that I'm having fun right now. I'm having the time of my life with AI and conversations and cultural conversations, and the reality that everyone has an opportunity right now. But when everyone has an opportunity, it's critical to look at where everyone's at in different regions and different areas. I think that in many cases, we are looking at different tools coming into play, but we're still looking at talent that's driving the conversations forward. Where you invest is still going to be in your people. Where you invest is still going to be on people who might have a different perspective, because they might get that technology. They might have a different curiosity and a different framework, where we're seeing people who are not engineers, who are in sales operations, build out brand new technology tools and products potentially and process, because they have access to AI. So you have to look at where is the diversity of talent and diversity of ideals, because I know some amazing talent and leaders who have been able to hire people around the world who have had different approaches to technology and have been able to look at it in a way that they don't have the institutional memory or baggage on how they should solve a problem, which we go back to about how do you leverage technology we were discussing earlier, right? So think about that perspective when you start looking at what you're trying to really accomplish with the technology that you're trying to push forth, and with AI and in your company and the culture as a whole, and really think about how do you actually look at people who can bring different ideas to the table? Because ultimately speaking, they're going to be the ones who accelerate you. And it's the same thing that we've always known about business. We can have an idea and we can be the ones who think we have the answer as leaders. But ultimately speaking, we're going to need people who can deliver so we can scale. And AI can do part of that. But the other part is the people who are running that AI and building better systems and processes, because they actually think there's a better approach that doesn't make sense to them. And that's the key. And that doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for every company, every region. It changes. And so using that is very valuable. And I think that's one of the things I would say is right now, it's about making sure people feel confident, comfortable, and joyful. But it's also making sure that you still highlight what domain expertise is, because once they have that domain expertise, they can think about it in a different way. That's what AI does.
Invest in your people. At the end of the day, invest in your people. Thank you so much, Sègun, for coming on the pod. And we really, really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and for being generous, your presence. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode. Until next time. Bye.